So your heart is still beating, brainwaves are functioning, your breath is slow and steady. You move, you change position, you're warm, you're cold. You're on your back and then you're on your front. These are the things that we know happen. But what happens that we don't know about? What is it possible to achieve when you don't know that you are doing it? Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Welcome to another short stories episode. Before we get started, a couple of quick shout outs and a recommendation from me. So shout out to Kim Rose on Instagram. Hello Kim. Kim got in touch to support my love of Murder, She Wrote after I mentioned it on a previous episode. So me and Kim bonding over Murder, She Wrote. Greg Needham. Hello Greg, thank you for your wonderful email, full of ideas. Thanks mate. Even though your dog hates me. And finally, I hope I get the surname right, Jacqueline Reitner, who is, I wouldn't have said that correctly, but Jacqueline, know that doesn't change my gratitude. Jacqueline's catching up with the podcast and she's just got to the Kevin Carter episode and she got in touch to talk about it. So, now here's my recommendation. I'll make this quick. I don't know if any of you are watching Queer Eye on Netflix, but Queer Eye is an absolutely fantastic piece of TV. It's so relevant to this time. It's just wonderful. Anyway, one of the men who are on it is a guy called Jonathan Van Ness. Now, he is really making a big name for himself in the world because it's just fantastic. One of the things that Jonathan Van Ness has is a podcast and it's called Getting Curious. And basically it's just brilliant. It's half an hour, roughly, each episode. He sits down every week with someone different and it's just him getting to know about something that he kind of wants to understand. Now, if you've watched an episode of Queer Eye and you think, or you've seen Jonathan Van Ness with his long hair and his big moustache online and thought, nah, I'll give that a miss, think again, because actually he is fiercely intelligent. He is super political. He is so switched on. And he sits down with people who are involved in things like Brexit in the UK at the moment and gets them to properly explain what Brexit is and what the effect is on the world. He does episodes on what's life really like in Iran at the moment. He then also sits down with figure skaters and asks them about what is the process, what is life as a figure skater. He sits down with real people, he gets their stories out of them. There's an amazing episode where, and I can't remember how he comes to know this woman, I think she's maybe just a friend of his. She comes on and she talks about the cultural differences of China and the USA, because I think she left China when she was young and she moved to the USA, and it's just brilliant. So yes, Jonathan Van Ness, Getting Curious, it's well worth a listen. Okay, on with the story, or should I say stories. I'm going to tell you two stories in this episode which share a very similar fact, but I'm going to wait until the end, until both stories are told, to discuss that. Are we ready? Okay, Let's go. Okay, first up, Kenneth. So it's 1987. Ah, what a year. And we are in Canada. So we need to know about a man called Kenneth James Parks. So he was 23 years old and he was married and he had a 5-month-old daughter. Kenneth was considered a good man, a man of good moral fibres. I mean, there's probably a less shit way of saying that, but you know, nonetheless, a good guy. Him and his wife, they had a good marriage, and their young baby, so life is good for them. And Kenneth was very close with his wife's family. Now, he was close in particular with his mother-in-law, Barbara. Barbara would refer to him as the gentle giant. Kenneth was a big man, very tall, very broad. Yes. So he gets on really well with Barbara and Dennis, his father-in-law. Now, behind the scenes, things are not going terribly well for Kenneth financially. He was a man who he liked to gamble occasionally. You know, here, there, just a little bit, not much, and as will so often happens, it begins to spiral out of control. He wanted to bet more and more and gamble as much as he could. And before he knew it, he had himself a problem, an addiction to gambling. Kenneth had a decent job in a financial firm and he was making pretty good money. But, and we know this, when gambling comes a knocking at your door, well, I guess you're just going to have to answer it. So he starts taking money out of the family savings. And at first, it's just a little bit here, and then there, and then more, and more, and more. And before you know it, his wife notices that their savings are seriously depleted. I mean, of course she notices. She has a 5-month-old. She's going to be on top of where is the money in this family at. So she confronts him and she says, do you know where this money has gone? Do you know what's happening? And Kenneth says, yeah, I've been gambling and I've spent a lot of our money, but it will stop. I promise it will stop. Does it stop? Oh, hell no. Because as we know, either from our own personal experience or from others or from things we've read, seen or whatever, when it's an addiction, it's an addiction. And you can say, oh, it's going to stop. 90% of the time, that's not true. Until you're actually forced to stop. That's not necessarily true. Kenneth goes on to embezzle $30,000 from his company to help him pay for his gambling addiction. Oh, whoa. Bad times for Kenneth. Bad times. But luckily for Kenneth, his wife, she's quite understanding. And she says, look, what you need to do is join Gamblers Anonymous. That's great. At least she's willing to, push him in that direction. His work, unfortunately, given that he's stolen from them $30,000, they are a little less forgiving. And they say, sorry mate, you're fired, get to fuck. And, I understand that as well. They're a big firm. They don't need an employee who's going to steal large amounts of cash. So now Kenneth has no job and a family. And as I said, he was close to Barbara and to Dennis, his in-laws. And his wife, she doesn't really want to tell them about what's going on. She wants him to be the person to do it. So she says, go to my mum and my dad and tell them the truth. Tell them about the gambling and tell them that you've been fired. Now that's never going to be a great conversation, is it? Can you imagine rocking up to your in-laws, Barbara and Dennis, and being like, hi, so do you remember when I said at the wedding that I would love and cherish and protect your daughter for life? Well, turns out I've spent all the money and I've got fired for stealing. Anyway, how are you? Barbara, I love what you've done with your hair. I mean, oh, come on, imagine having that conversation. He doesn't ever get to that conversation because something major gets in the way. His mother-in-law, Barbara, is murdered in her bed. And her father-in-law, Dennis, is almost murdered. Who was the killer? Well, it was Kenneth himself. At 3 a.m. on the morning of May 24th, 1987, while the rest of the town is fast asleep, Kenneth drives about 15 miles from his own home to the home of his in-laws. He enters the house with a key that he has to their house. He goes into their garage and he gets hold of a tire iron. He creeps up to the bedroom where they're sleeping and he approaches the side of the bed that Barbara is sleeping on. He raises the tire iron above her head and he repeatedly brings it down on her head until she's dead. His father-in-law Dennis jumps out of bed and he tries to stop Kenneth, but it's too late. Kenneth puts his hands around Dennis's throat and tries to strangle him to death. Dennis passes out, but he isn't dead. So, what does Kenneth do next? Well, he gets into his car, he drives to the nearest police station, and he asks to speak to a police officer. And when the officer comes to him, he says the words, I think I've just killed 2 people. Of course, the police, they ask for details, which he willingly offers. He tells them everything that's just happened, and he's arrested for first-degree murder. Back at the in-laws' house, police find that Barbara is dead, in bed, and Dennis is barely clinging on to life, but he is alive. Now this next bit is odd. This will come up later, okay? It's quite odd. During the routine sort of physical check that anyone who's been arrested has at a police station, the doctor notices that there are tendons in Kenneth's hand, the hand that he used to smash Barbara's head in with the tire iron. There's tendons in it and they are really badly damaged. They're like really ripped. And this is a sign that he has held that tire iron so tightly that he's ripped the tendons in his hand, and that when he was trying to strangle Dennis, he's made it worse. But yet, the strange thing is, Kenneth shows no sign of pain. Not one bit of pain. So the doctor's going, those tendons in your hand are ripped apart. Anybody else would be screaming the place down, and Kenneth shows absolutely not a single bit of pain. Why? I mean, the doctor's like, is this guy a fucking cartoon character? Why can't he feel the pain in his hand? Now we're going to leave Kenneth just for 1 minute while I tell you about the second story. And that's the story of Scott. Scott Falatar lived in Arizona with his wife, Yarmila. Yarmila, what a name, that's fantastic. The couple had met right when they were both studying in Arizona. So they'd met at a young age, got married. Great. Scott would later work as an engineer, Yarmila as a teaching assistant. They were a really happy couple. They had 2 young children. They were really popular in their local area, very sociable. You know the kind, they were at every kind of community event. Everybody knew Scott and Yarmila. No one could really see what the hell was going to happen next. In January 1997, the couple went to bed after they had put the kids down, and they watched TV for a short time and then off to bed. Next door, a neighbour who was still awake was looking out of his window, and he saw something that was going to chill him to the bone. He saw Scott dragging the body of Yarmila towards the pool in their back garden. He then saw Scott put his wife's head under the water and hold it there. And there is blood everywhere. There is a trail of blood in the back garden. Yarmila has been stabbed 44 times. Fuck me. 44 times. Whoa. Stabbed 44 times, and then her head held underwater. Whoa. So this neighbour calls the police. Of course that's what you would do. Police arrive and they find the dead body of Yarmila. But where is Scott? Well, he's in bed. So they get him out of bed, they arrest him, he's taken to the police station, and he's charged with first-degree murder. Okay, so what do we have here? What have we got on our hands? We've got a man who got himself into a lot of debt gambling. Kenneth, who has killed his mother-in-law and nearly killed his father-in-law. We have husband Scott, whose wife has been stabbed 44 times, and a neighbour has witnessed him pushing her head underwater. Now, do either of these men stand a chance in court? Do they have any kind of defence? Yeah, they do. But it might not be the kind of defence that you are expecting. Both men say that these incidents happened because they were sleepwalking at the time. Right, I won't lie. I wanted to laugh at that. I was like, sleepwalking? Fuck off. Wouldn't it be fucking stupid? I thought that is so ridiculous. But here's the thing. It actually gets taken very seriously. If we deal first with Kenneth. Remember that after the attack on his in-laws, Kenneth walked into that station and said, I think I've killed 2 people. Well, what Kenneth has to say is, I was asleep during the whole thing. I was not awake, and I do not remember anything from that experience. Now you'd think, right, in court, that a jury might go, nah, come on mate, you'll need to do better than that. What a pish excuse. But they don't. And they don't because of this. Sleep experts and scientists are brought into the court who will say, this is perfectly plausible. They'll say sleepwalking is a thing that we still don't really fully understand it. And the extent of it can't really be determined easily. It's just such a strange thing that, along with like night terrors, it's just so odd. I don't really have any like weird sleeping things, I don't think. I have a friend who goes into a deep, deep sleep and then it just wakes up in the middle of the night, forgets entirely where he is and just assumes that everywhere is the toilet. So he will just piss all over the place and then just go back to bed, forget all about it. And the next morning he's like, oh, what the fuck happened here? I'm not kidding, the night before he was getting married, I was staying with him. He got up in the middle of the night, pissed in his own wedding shoes. Pissed in his shoes, and we had to wash them out in the morning. And he had to wear them wet to the wedding. Just like, it's just a really strange thing of like, he wakes up in his own house where he knows where everything is, but in his deep sleep gets so disorientated that he's like, what's that you say? A wardrobe? Yep, I'll just piss in there. That's fine. Just a nightmare. So, in this case, the prosecution will say, this is a terrible defence. This is awful. It's absolute bollocks. You are making it up. Now, do you remember when I said that he felt none of the pain in his hands from the ripped tendons? Sleep scientists in court will say that's because he was asleep. He was in such a deep, deep sleep at that point. There was no way that he could have felt that pain. That's why he wasn't screaming out in agony. So, the jury, they rest on all of the information and they have to decide, is Kenneth guilty or was he genuinely asleep? So now, in the case of Scott, a similar case is presented in court. He was asleep. He doesn't know how his wife got 44 stab wounds and he doesn't remember dragging her to the pool. I mean, we've all tried the, oh no, sorry, I don't remember that tactic. I mean, not in killing anyone, well, I would hope, but just in the, oh sorry, oh I totally forgot, which is such a lie. But in this case, it's tricky because there were clothes found in Scott's washing machine which had been washed and they showed evidence of blood stains. There was also evidence that blood had been washed off of surfaces in the house. So yeah, that makes it a bit murkier, but he's sticking by, I was asleep. Where are you, mate? Where are you? So the jury rests. In both cases, the juries here, they have a very difficult decision to make. I mean, they're hearing all this scientific evidence about what happens to the brain when you fall asleep. And there's no end of fascinating stuff there. I've got so many questions about it. I've got questions about like sleep cycles, how that works, how night terrors work. Also, I often wonder, why can't you sleep when you're completely exhausted sometimes? Also about sleeping positions and why like one person can be like, oh, I can't possibly sleep sitting up, well, another person, that's absolutely fine. Another person's like, I can't sleep on my back, or I have to be on my side, has to be like this. I just think all that stuff's interesting. I also wonder, why do guys wake up with a hard-on out of sleep every day? These are the scientific questions I am trying to get to the bottom of. They're not all about hard-ons, but that is a genuine question that I wonder. So many questions. So these two men are about to find out their fate, and here's how it goes. Kenneth, in the case of murdering his mother-in-law with a tire iron is found not guilty, and he is free of all charges. He walks out of court. The jury, they fully believed that the action of killing Barbara with the tire iron and attempting to strangle Dennis was all done while he was asleep. Scott, in the case of murdering his wife by drowning and stabbing, is found guilty. The jury simply don't believe it. He's charged with first-degree murder, and at first he is sentenced to death, but that's later reduced to life in prison. The jury refused to believe that you could stab someone 44 times and drag someone's body into water while asleep. So both men, they used the same defence, but for each of them, the results were very, very different. And so ends the story. Okay, it's fascinating. And people will say, of course they will, what a load of bollocks. That's nonsense. Anyone could say, oh, I was asleep during that or whatever, or I was, I wasn't conscious when I did these things. I think the difference between these two cases is that in the first case of Kenneth had actually been a sleepwalker. So there was a prior history of he'd obviously never done anything like that before, but he had been sleepwalking. He had that was definitely a part of his life. In the second story with Scott, he'd done it like once or twice when he was younger, and it's quite common for it to happen once or twice to anybody. But I think when it came to it, a jury went, nah, you're clutching at straws here, mate. Your defence is clutching at straws, and they're picking sleepwalking as a reason that this might have happened. But yeah, I mean, if we knew the answers to these things, then there wouldn't be any more scientific exploration to be done. I'm sure we've all had very strange sleep experiences. I'd love to hear them. I really would. And then, yeah, as I say, if we were at the end of knowing it, then there would be no more work to be done on the human brain or trying to understand it. And there is more work to be done, and we're just not there yet. And maybe there'll come a time where actually people standing up in a court saying, I did it when I was sleepwalking, won't sound as crazy as it has in these cases. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is, remember the moral of the story. The next time you kill someone, just say you were asleep. I'm kidding. Obviously, I'm kidding. Okay, that is about it for this episode. Get in touch with your crazy sleep stories. I'm sure some of you will have. I can't wait to hear them. Okay, if you want to talk to me, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. Join the Facebook group. It's fantastic. You can also email me, extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. I love every message that you send me, no matter however way it gets to me. Until the next episode, thank you for listening. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.